The crazy freedom you feel when you stop caring about opinions. Alright, let's take a second to think about our daily lives. Every single one of us is navigating a constant stream of opinions, what people think about us, what they expect from us, how they judge us. It's like we're all walking through life with an invisible audience, constantly casting their silent votes on who we are, what we do, and how we should live. But here's the wild part: most of these opinions, they don't matter. At least not in the way we think they do. Yet we let them control us. Why? Why do we allow ourselves to be so deeply affected by what others think when, at the end of the day, those opinions have zero consequence on our true happiness? Now, imagine what it would feel like to set that weight down, to finally stop caring about meeting expectations that aren't even aligned with who you are. Can you feel that lightness, that sense of freedom? When you stop caring about opinions, you give yourself permission to explore your true potential without fear, without limits. You start asking yourself what you really want, not what others expect you to want. And that's a radical shift. But how do we get there? How do we reach that point where we no longer let the opinions of others dictate our actions, our choices, or more importantly, our sense of self-worth? Let's break this down, because it's not just about flipping a mental switch. This is about understanding the philosophical root of why we care so much in the first place. You see, from the moment we're born, we're conditioned to seek approval. Think back to childhood. We were praised for good behavior, scolded for bad. Our achievements were celebrated, and our failures, well, they were met with disappointment. Over time, we internalize this idea that external validation is the measure of our worth. And this belief followed us into adulthood, where the opinions of others became the mirror through which we see ourselves. But here's the thing: that mirror is a lie. The opinions of others are reflections of their perceptions, their experiences, their insecurities, and yet, we let those reflections shape how we see ourselves. It's like we're living in a hall of mirrors at a carnival, where every reflection is distorted, yet we treat it as if it's the truth. But stop for a second and ask yourself who's really in control of your life when you're constantly seeking approval. Is it you, or is it the collective judgment of everyone around you?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Now, let's get deep here. Have you ever wondered what it is that makes us so afraid of judgment? What is it in the human psyche that fears rejection or criticism so much that we'll contort ourselves to fit into someone else's mold? The answer lies in our fundamental need for belonging. We are social creatures. We evolved to survive in groups, and rejection from the group once meant a literal threat to survival. But here's the catch: in the modern world, this fear is outdated. We no longer need to fit into every group to survive. Yet, the fear remains. Take a moment and reflect. How many decisions have you made in the last week? No, scratch that. How many decisions have you made in the last day based on what you thought someone else would think? And what if those opinions, those judgments, weren't even real? What if they were just assumptions you made about what others might think? This brings us to a key insight: most of the opinions we worry about, they're not even real. They exist only in our minds, projections of our own insecurities. We assume people are judging us, watching us, criticizing us, when, in reality, most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to give us more than a passing thought. So why do we give people who are often not even thinking about us so much control over our inner lives? The moment you stop caring about opinions is the moment you reclaim your autonomy. And autonomy, that's the ultimate freedom. When you stop caring, you begin to live authentically. You start making decisions based on what you want, not what you think others expect of you. And that's where the crazy part comes in. This kind of freedom is so rare that it feels almost rebellious. In a world where everyone is constantly trying to fit in, the act of living true to yourself is a revolutionary act. But let's not romanticize it too much just yet. Let's be real, this isn't easy. It's not like you can wake up tomorrow and suddenly stop caring about people's opinions. It's a process, a gradual unlearning of years, maybe decades of conditioning. The first step: awareness. Becoming aware of how often you let other people's opinions influence your choices. Awareness is the key that unlocks the door to freedom. So here's a question for you. How often do you censor yourself because of what others might think? And more importantly, how much of your life is shaped by the fear of judgment? When you stop and really think about it, it's staggering. We're talking about a lifetime of decisions, big and small, that have been influenced by a fear that, in many cases, is completely unfounded. The power of rejection, why embracing criticism is the ultimate freedom. Let's talk about rejection for a moment. Most of us fear it like it's the ultimate form of failure, right? The idea that someone might disapprove of us, criticize us, or worse, completely reject us can be paralyzing. But what if I told you that rejection is actually one of the most powerful tools for freedom? That embracing criticism, rather than running from it, is the key to unlocking a life where you don't just survive, but thrive. Think about it. The fear of rejection is rooted in the fear of being cast out, of standing alone. But here's the irony: when you constantly chase approval, when you bend over backward to avoid rejection, you're not really standing with others, you're standing with a version of yourself that's molded by everyone else's expectations. And that version, it's not you. It's a mask you wear to avoid rejection, but in doing so, you reject yourself. So, what happens when you stop fearing rejection? You start living more authentically, for one. You stop filtering your words, your actions, your desires through the perception of others. You begin to stand in your own truth, regardless of how others react. And here's the crazy part: the more you embrace rejection, the more powerful you become. Why? Because when you no longer fear being cast out, you're free to be the most authentic version of yourself. And people can feel that. Let's get philosophical for a second. The ancient Stoics believed that the only thing we can truly control in life is our own response to the world. Everything else, other people's opinions, circumstances beyond our control, even our own bodies, is outside of our influence. So why do we waste so much energy trying to control how others see us? Why do we exhaust ourselves trying to manage perceptions that, in the end, are completely outside of our control? Here's something to think about: what would happen if you stopped trying to control the uncontrollable? If you embraced the fact that no matter what you do, some people will approve, and some won't. Some will love you, and some will criticize you. That's life. Instead of fearing rejection, what if you leaned into it? What if you saw it as a necessary filter that helps you find the people, the opportunities, and the experiences that are truly aligned with who you are? This is where freedom lies. Once you accept that rejection is inevitable, you stop fearing it and you start embracing it. You understand that every rejection is just another step toward living a life that's true to you, not to what others want you to be. When you begin to see criticism as feedback rather than a personal attack, you shift from a defensive mindset to a growth mindset. You stop taking things so personally because you realize that rejection doesn't define your worth, it simply reflects someone else's perspective. Let's reflect on this deeper. Have you ever been rejected and later realized it was the best thing that could have happened to you? Maybe it was a job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, or a group you didn't fit into. In the moment, it felt like a punch to the gut, but looking back, you realize that it opened the door to something far better. That's because rejection often pushes us toward the path we're meant to be on. It's like life's way of saying, "This isn't for you. Keep moving." Here's another profound insight: the more you embrace rejection, the more resilient you become. And this resilience, it's a superpower. It allows you to take risks, to step into the unknown, and to pursue your passions without the fear of failure. When you stop caring about opinions, when you stop fearing rejection, you give yourself permission to take bold steps forward. And those bold steps, they're the ones that lead to real growth, real success, real fulfillment. But let's not sugarcoat it. Embracing rejection doesn't mean it stops hurting. It stings. It's uncomfortable. But over time, that sting becomes less about pain and more about clarity. You begin to see rejection not as a sign of your inadequacy, but as a sign that you're on the right track. You're no longer wasting your time trying to fit into places you were never meant to be in. Instead, you're carving out a space that is entirely your own. So here's a question for you: what would your life look like if you stopped fearing rejection? If you stopped bending your will to fit into other people's expectations? What if, instead of seeking approval, you sought alignment with yourself, with your values, and with the people who truly get you? That's the real power. When you stop caring about opinions, you don't just feel free, you are free. Free to live a life that's yours, not one dictated by the judgments or criticisms of others. And that freedom? It's priceless. A weight of expectations, how letting go unleashes your true potential. Let's get real. Expectations are heavy. They're like invisible weights we carry around, often without even realizing it. Think about all the expectations placed on you by society, by family, by friends, by yourself. They're everywhere. You should do this, you should be like that, you should want these things. It's relentless, right? And what's even crazier, we internalize these expectations so deeply that we often mistake them for our own desires. But ask yourself this: how much of what you're striving for in life is truly what you want? And how much of it is just you trying to meet someone else's expectations? Here's the hard truth: as long as you're living under the weight of expectations, you're not living for yourself, you're living for others. And that's where things get tricky, because the more you try to meet these external expectations, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. It's like trying to run a race while carrying a backpack full of bricks. You can still move forward, sure, but you're not moving freely. You're not moving with purpose. You're just trying to keep up. But what happens when you let go of these expectations? What happens when you realize that you don't have to live up to anyone else's idea of who you should be? That's when the real magic happens. That's when you start to unleash your true potential. Let's break it down. Expectations are always about something external. They're about what others think you should do, how others think you should succeed, or who others think you should become. But your potential, that's internal. It's something that comes from within you. It's that unique combination of your talents, passions, and experiences that only you can bring to the world. And the more you focus on meeting external expectations, the more you suppress that potential. You start living for others, not for yourself. Now, imagine what it would feel like to set that weight down, to finally stop caring about meeting expectations that aren't even aligned with who you are. Can you feel that lightness, that sense of freedom? When you stop caring about opinions, you give yourself permission to explore your true potential without fear, without limits. You start asking yourself what you really want, not what others expect you to want. And that's a radical shift. Here's a question for you. What would you do differently if you didn't care about living up to anyone else's expectations? If you took a step back and asked yourself what truly excites you, what lights you up, what makes you feel alive, how would your life change? What new paths would you explore? The truth is, the moment you let go of expectations is the moment you unlock the door to your true potential. You stop living a life of shoulds and start living a life of wants. And that's where the real growth happens. The path to authenticity, living a life true to yourself. Let's get to the core of it all, authenticity. It's a word we hear a lot, but what does it really mean to live authentically? At its simplest, it means living a life that's true to who you are at your core, not who you're expected to be. It's about aligning your actions, values, and desires with your true self, not the version of yourself shaped by society, family, or peer pressure. But here's the thing, authenticity requires courage. It means letting go of the masks you've been wearing and stepping into the world as your unfiltered self. And that takes guts. Why is it so hard to live authentically? It's because authenticity comes with risk, the risk of rejection, the risk of being misunderstood, and the risk of standing alone. When you choose to live authentically, you're not just breaking free from the expectations of others, you're also stepping into a space where you might face criticism, judgment, or even loneliness. But here's the paradox: while authenticity may feel isolated at first, it's actually the most powerful way to connect with others. Why? Because when you show up as your true self, you attract people who resonate with you, not with the version you've been pretending to be. Think about this for a second. How many of your relationships are built on the foundation of who you truly are versus who you've tried to be to fit in? That's a tough question, but an important one. Living authentically means you stop wasting energy on maintaining relationships that don't align with your true self. Instead, you open yourself up to deeper, more meaningful connections that are built on mutual understanding and acceptance rather than superficial judgments. But authenticity doesn't just transform your relationships, it transforms everything. When you live authentically, you stop chasing external markers of success, things like status, approval, or material wealth. Instead, you start pursuing what genuinely fulfills you. And fulfillment, that's something external validation can never give you. You begin to find joy in the things that matter to you, not the things that are supposed to matter according to society's script. But now, let's get practical. How do you start living authentically? It begins with self-awareness. You have to get clear on what you actually want, what you truly value, and what brings you joy. And here's the kicker: this requires honesty, brutal honesty. You need to strip away the layers of shoulds and musts that have been piled on you over the years and ask yourself, what do I really want? Once you get clear on that, you can start making decisions that align with your true self. Here's a question to reflect on: what parts of your life would change if you lived authentically? Would you still be in the same job, the same relationships? Would you spend your time differently? When you stop caring about others' opinions and expectations, you unlock the freedom to live a life that's deeply meaningful and uniquely yours. Authenticity isn't just about being yourself, it's about becoming the best version of yourself, free from the constraints of a world that's always trying to tell you who to be. And that's the ultimate freedom.